The latest Federal Reserve meeting minutes show that members expected 2 to 3 25 basis point rate cuts by the end of the year. Joining us to discuss is Dan Varroney, the CEO of Potomac Core Consulting and author of the upcoming book, Rethinking Economic Growth, How Small Businesses Can Help Consistently Grow the Economy. So first of all, good afternoon to you, Dan. What do you make of the pace of rate cuts? Is it aggressive, too slow, or appropriate in your view?
Great questions. So I think that the pace of rate cuts is way too slow. Just a few weeks ago, I wrote an op-ed article asking for free 50 basis point cuts for a total of 150 basis point cuts before the end of the year. And the reason why I did that is because I felt imperative that the Fed act far more aggressively because of the rapidly deteriorating labor market. We're seeing job notices, job losses, announcements from companies on a regular basis. The last number we saw, the private jobs numbers, were way down and way off. And I think that there needs to be far more aggressive action by the Federal Reserve sooner rather than later.
Okay, can you talk to us about the labor market a bit more? How severe is this softening, as some would describe it? Is it very concerning in your view?
It's absolutely concerning. So when you look at since 2022, 1.1 million jobs have been eroded from the job market. And part of this is because we've not been able to get accurate data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Otherwise, we would have known this sooner. There's considerable softening in the jobs market. And the reason why I think the Fed needs to move faster is as follows. So in the United States, we're a 70% consumer-driven economy. If you've got people out of work, that's going to hurt the economy. The economy will take a significant hit. So the jobs numbers tell us that there are serious problems, and it runs across multiple sectors, and it needs to be addressed through very aggressive Federal Reserve rate cuts.
And, you know, of course, we cannot talk about the labor market without talking about small businesses, right? They employ a large percentage of all Americans, and their growth hinges on affordable access to capital, which is, of course, directly tied to interest rates. And I talked about your upcoming book, and I understand it focuses on small businesses. It's called Rethinking Economic Growth, How Small Businesses Can Help Consistently Grow the Economy. So, Dan, can you explain for us how higher borrowing costs actually translate into fewer hires, delayed expansions, or even businesses closing?
A great question. So small businesses employ half of the U.S. labor market today. I'll give you another data point. So 99.9% of the companies in the United States today are small businesses. Small businesses create 2 out of 3 private sector jobs. It's imperative that small businesses have the tools and resources they need to employ new workers. So for high costs of capital, that will prevent workers from taking advantage of the new big, beautiful law. As you know, there's 100% expensing for plants and equipment. And while access to capital has improved, the cost of capital on a relative basis is still too high. If we bring interest rates down a little further, that will make it more affordable for small businesses to take out those loans. They'll be able to invest in new plants and equipment, and they will do quite a bit of hiring. The fact that they create 2 of 3 new private sector jobs says that if they have a lower cost of capital, they will employ far more workers. Why I am so passionate about this topic is because I see small business as a number of solutions. A solution to addressing the rapidly deteriorating jobs market. I see it as helping to address economic growth. I believe with the footprint of small businesses in the United States, that given the right policy environment and interest rate environment, that small businesses would grow considerably and that the U.S. could grow on a regular basis at 3%.
So, Dan, can you explain for us how do interest rates specifically affect small businesses that is different than large corporations?
So for large corporations, large corporations have the ability to borrow at higher levels. because they have greater resources. For small businesses, they don't have those types of resources. So, for example, on average, here in the U.S., the average small business employs as few as 8 people. They don't have the ability to take out loans at higher rates because it'll cost them more to service their loans. If it costs them more to service their loans, they're not going to invest in new products, new plants, new equipment, or new workers. And that would be a significant hit to job creation and economic growth.
So you're saying that if small businesses have to borrow at higher costs, it might impact economic growth. But isn't that sort of what the Federal Reserve wants, to slow consumption, lower inflation as a result of fewer jobs?
So when you look at the inflation numbers where they are today, on a relative basis, they're far lower than they were during the last administration. They had reached 9.1%. Now they're at around 2.7, 2.8%, and they're considerably lower. And the cost of goods are far lower than they were. So on a real-time basis, inflation is stabilized. And I think that when we think of the Federal Reserve and the opportunity to give small businesses to invest and to hire, the opportunity is here and now. And more importantly, if the labor market continues to deteriorate at the current pace, we could move into serious economic times here in the United States. And the way to avoid that is by lowering those interest rates, giving small businesses a lower cost of capital, giving them the ability to invest.
And we can potentially go into this negative feedback loop, right? Because sustained higher rates could create slower small business growth, which leads to weaker hiring, right, as you mentioned, which then depresses spending further, and then the loop just goes on and on.
The economy will get worse. It will spiral well into negative territory. Here's what I learned in writing my book. So there are 12 case studies in my book, 12 different industries. What I learned is that when small business does well, the overall economy is doing well. That's why the Federal Reserve must lower the interest rates and help reduce that cost of borrowing. Because if they do that, we are going to reverse what could be a further downward spiral in the labor market.
Do you think the Federal Reserve is considering small businesses into their policy decisions?
That's a really good question. I just got a survey in the last week or so from the Federal Reserve, from the Cleveland Federal Reserve, asking me about small business borrowing. I think they're far more attuned than they have been in prior years to small business, because they understand that small business isn't just a part of the economy. Small business is the economy.
Okay, Dan, just one last question. I'm wondering here if you have any tips at all. In a high rate environment, what strategies potentially can small businesses use to survive and grow?
Well, what was interesting in my 50 hours of interviews for my book is that a small business do a great job helping and supporting each other in local communities. If there are ways they need to do things less expensively, they do that. I would first say that. The second thing that I would say is that I noted in my book that small businesses have already begun to make investments in technology. They have found ways, and they're looking for ways to operate less expensively. So they've got the local magnifier effect. They're operating less expensively with technology, and they're innovating all the time. What I was most impressed by in the research for my book and my interviews is the extent to which these entrepreneurs found new and different ways to operate leaner, more efficiently, and come up with new ideas to sell more product and be more profitable.
Well, Dan, it was really great to talk to you today. Thank you for sharing your comments. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.